Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dr. Doctor, the show where no topic is too hot or too cold. Whether it's politics, religion, relationships, entertainment, or everyday life, you will be hearing from the experts. This show is not for the faint of heart or the faint of mind. But if you want to be inspired, you have come to the right place. And now, prepare to be enlightened as we introduce the host of Dr. Doctor, Dr. Peter Tassi, and his close advisor, Dr. Fooch.
Welcome back to Dr. Doctor. Good to have you with us again today. We're hoping that you had a great week, and we thank you for joining us again on this Dr. Doctor podcast. Before we begin our look at the next great mind in history, this is the Great Mind series we're doing, as you know. But before we look at the next great mind in history, Aristotle, let's be reminded of the last two we did, and I hope you had a chance to listen to those on Leonardo da Vinci and Friedrich Nietzsche, two great minds in history. So we hope you had a chance to listen to those. If you didn't, go back and have a listen to those two great minds. We don't have Junior with us today, but he'll be joining us next week when we do Isaac Newton. So today we're looking at Aristotle. And before we do, I think one of the questions we should ask ourselves is, do we dare to be great? Granted, almost 100% of the human population do not have the minds of these great people, me included. However, that doesn't mean we can't be great as well. Think great and create great things. All of us have this potential in us to be great in our own way, small ways and big ways. But the question is, do we dare to be great? Do we have the courage to be great? Are we willing to step outside of the framework or the box that we're in? Are we willing to take the risk and step outside that framework or box and think and speak in a way that some might consider dangerous? Because many of these great people in history, some of them, like Socrates, were killed for their thinking. And some were ostracized, some were left to live a life in solitude and loneliness because they were so great that nobody could really understand what they were saying completely. But more so, people could not, they could not adapt to what these people were offering. It was too far off the beaten track, as true as it was. For example, if somebody comes along and for thousands of years you believe the world is flat and they say it's round, it's pretty dangerous. And even though evidence may prove that the world is round, for you to step outside the box and believe that is also dangerous. So do we dare to be great? Do we dare to take what society, religion, political narratives has set true for us and challenge them? Are we willing to challenge the propaganda often fed to us by schools, churches, politicians, and of course, especially in present day, the news? Are we willing to think critically of all those things we are told, especially those things that are fed to us by the ones it benefits most, the super wealthy, those who are in control of the narrative? Can you do it? Can we do it? Do we have the courage to do it? And once we begin to think critically and to just not blatantly go through an entire life of 60, 70, 80, 90 years and accept whatever's told to us, that's the first step to becoming great and to be like one of these great minds in history that we study. And here, as in the case with many great thinkers, can we shed the lies that have been told to us throughout our life, throughout our childhood, our teen years, our adult life? Lies like, you're not that smart, you can't do that, that's already been thought of, you're stupid, that's too dangerous, oh, I wouldn't do that, you'll get into a lot of trouble, you will amount to nothing, or you are unlovable, you are a pain in the butt, and on it goes. All the lies told to us, even by the people who are closest to us or loved us most. Are we willing to say no to all of that? Are we willing to step outside of that world that was created by others for us to live in? If you have the insight to see these knocks that you've taken throughout your life as lies, and you have the courage to rise above these lies, you are a special person. And the greatness there within your mind and within your heart is ready to enlighten the world in your own way. So here we go. Aristotle, certainly somebody who stepped outside the box, said many controversial things, and to some extent later in life paid a price for that. As smart as I am, and that's not that smart, I'm a mental midget compared to Aristotle. He's such a great mind and thinker. He shaped the thinking of the entire Western world as well as the Islamic world until this very day. In fact, many people would consider Aristotle to be the most influential thinker in history. That is why he is often referred to as the philosopher. He affected the writings of many great thinkers that followed him. And we're talking with Aristotle 2,300 years ago, and people that followed him for hundreds of years later, like Aquinas, who shaped the theology of the entire Catholic Christian church throughout the world, based his theology on Aristotle. Now, to really get a good understanding of Aristotle, you have to spend years studying his works. To have someone comment on Aristotle and capture his teachings, you really need to be a professor of philosophy with years of study of this man. Now, YouTube offers many great short documentaries or commentaries on Aristotle. I recommend you take a look at them and listen to them. They're very good. But to get right into the heart of him and read his readings is a real challenge. So we just cover the surface here because I don't have the intellect or the ability to, or the time to spend a lifetime studying Aristotle and to really understand them. I'd like to look at Aristotle in light of our own life and see whether or not he speaks to us and how he challenges us to be great people. He was born in 384 BC in Macedonia. His father was a doctor. He had siblings and eventually married in his life and had his own children. He was taught by Plato, and Plato, as you probably know, was taught by Socrates. Although philosophy started long before these great giants of philosophy, these geniuses, it's these three men, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, that really had an impact on the world and shaped modern thought. Just as a side note, Aristotle taught Alexander the Great as a young boy. As unruly and as difficult as Alexander was, he did manage to eventually gain Alexander's respect. And he taught Alexander things like disciplines like philosophy, morality, logic, and the arts. As great an impact as it had on Alexander, young Alexander, unfortunately, his teachings did not impact Alexander enough. It didn't hold him through his life, because as we know, Alexander eventually turned into a tyrant, believing he himself was God. But when Alexander conquered Athens, he allowed Aristotle, his mentor and teacher, to establish a school there. And so Aristotle is famous for the establishment of a school called the Lyceum. And students there were expected to study every aspect of life, every discipline. And Aristotle expected his students to do a lot of writing. Following Alexander's death, Athens was reconquered, and Aristotle was now considered an enemy of the state because he wouldn't honor or hold true to traditional beliefs, especially in the area of believing in certain gods. So he fled to an island, and there Aristotle stayed there and lived until he died at the age of 62. It was an island where his mother's home was. Because he was considered an enemy of the state, many of his writings were destroyed or lost. Characteristic of many great people in history. You're great and you write great things, and if people for the most part don't pay attention, and if they do, they destroy your works because you're so radical. So today we only have about 1 million of the 10 million words written by Aristotle. It was a couple hundred years after he died that the world really recognized just how brilliant he was. So here we go again. As I mentioned, we see the pattern. A great mind shunned by society and culture, and many of his own people. Do you find that in your life? That many of your creative and brilliant ideas, many of your views of the world cause people to shun you and ostracize you? Because he thought different, because he stepped outside of traditional thought, because he was a threat to the status quo, because people were jealous of his brilliance, because he would not bend knee to any way of believing or thinking that he didn't hold true. These are the reasons why people like Aristotle and people like many of you end up suffering at the hands of society, an unforgiving and ignorant society. So I bring you back to the introduction, and I ask you the question, do you dare to be great? Like every great mind in history, Aristotle had an insatiable curiosity. He was fascinated and interested in everything. Millions of questions, millions of things to investigate. The curiosity never ended. Consequently, he studied and ended up writing on everything. Almost like we discussed Leonardo da Vinci. Marine life, science, biology, anatomy, mathematics, astronomy, civics, politics, philosophy, and more. One of the many things that attracts me to Aristotle is his writing on happiness and his emphasis on the virtues. If you had a chance to read my book, My 3 Promises, Your Path to Happiness, you'll see there that I adopt a lot of Aristotle's views. And one of them is, and I quote in the book, is what Aristotle said, which I hold to be true. We have a moral obligation to be happy. Some of us are raised to think that it's shameful to find happiness, or it's selfish to seek happiness. But no, in fact, finding happiness is one of our main goals in life. And of course, like Aristotle says, when you find happiness, when you achieve happiness, you're a better person and you create better communities. And Aristotle points out that people that are happy have specific virtues. And Aristotle was big in virtues. And if, like I said, you go to the internet, you could see all the Aristotelian virtues. And he was big on virtues. Virtues like courage, temperance, liberality, magnificence, magnanimity, truthfulness, friendliness, modesty, patience, and wittiness. These are key virtues to him. Now, I too happen to believe that the virtues are a critical, something critical to achieve or to live by. However, I do part from Aristotle's thinking somewhat. But the virtues that I talk about in my book on happiness are humility, gratitude, wisdom, empathy, forgiveness, charity, peacefulness, and integrity. And I talk about how these virtues are the virtues of a happy person. Aristotle talks about the virtues that I mentioned with him are the virtues of a happy person. Now, before we get into that a little bit more, let's look at the virtues. Aristotle explains how virtues are the midpoint or balance in life between two extremes. For example, a courageous person knows the difference between going into a fight that they cannot win, something that is totally futile, and essentially you're committing suicide. That's one extreme. And the other extreme is the person who runs from a situation when he should have acted to defend someone, to help someone, or fight for a great cause. So each virtue for Aristotle is a balance between two extremes. That's what the virtues are. A witty person who is tactful will know the difference between acting like a buffoon or boorish for the sake of being funny. So he takes not buffoon, not boorish, but the middle path, the balance, wittiness, and acts properly. Honesty is the midpoint between brutal honesty, where people blurt out everything, including things they should not be saying, and failing to say things that need to be said. Temperance could be the balance between extreme asceticism or extreme for hunger, extreme hunger, choosing that path, or overeating. So this is how Aristotle defined a virtue. It's that midpoint, the middle path. And he talks about living the life in the middle path. Much like Buddhism, which is the religion of the middle path. The Buddha talked about balance and living with this balance. So we all have a desire to be virtuous. People want to be around virtuous people. And people notice that. So people go, gee, that guy's popular, and people want to be around them. They want to emulate him. They want to live like him. They want to be like him. So what do I have to do to be like that? Well, I have to have the virtues that he has. These people that are virtuous are people of good character. So they're held in high regard. These are people who do good things. And these are people who are happy. So Aristotle is saying that if we can be a virtuous person, if we strive to achieve the virtues, then we will, in living out those virtues, live a rich, fulfilled, and happy life. We will know what to do, what to say, how to handle every situation. And we will always do that which is right. We will be a good person, a person of virtue, becoming what we were created to be. And in so doing, we live a fulfilled and happy life with other people emulating us. So in essence, I guess Aristotle is saying, look, if you work at achieving the virtues, especially the virtues he points out, and you acquire those virtues as part of your life, what you say, what you think, and what you do, then you will have achieved a level of life that will bring you happiness and fulfillment and you will live a rich life in which people will want to be like you, they will want to be around you, they will want to emulate you. It's at this point, if I understand Aristotle correctly, where him and I part somewhat in our thinking. And once again, I'm a mental midget. Okay, I don't have the mind of any of these great men, but I have my own mind and I have my own opinions. But we do part here. As much as I like Aristotle and am influenced by what little I've read on him, there is a parting here. And you see that in the book, My Three Promises, Your Path to Happiness. It's my contention, in my theory to finding happiness, that if we're able to empty ourselves of everything that is self-serving and desire, we will discover in that process that we are beings of love. So basically, at our core, it is my contention, there is this divinity. I call it divinity. That's the best word I could choose. Whether you believe in God or not, whether you're an atheist, a theist, or agnostic, I choose the word divinity because I think it's the best word to describe that in our nature, in basic to us as humans, we were created to love. And so if we can strip away everything, just get rid of all the shackles of life, all the brainwashing, and clear our minds and empty ourselves of selfish desires, we will find that at the core we are a being of love. And in discovering that our true nature is love, and in living that love, we fulfill who we truly are. And in fulfilling who we truly are, being who we were created to be, we become happy people. We live a happy and fulfilled life. The virtues I speak of is that I've mentioned earlier. Those virtues I speak of, they merely describe in human language that is limited the kind of character and attributes you will have when you reach that inner self, which is pure love. So in this way, Aristotle and I part. I tend to take more of the Buddhist, or some may say Zen Buddhist approach, where if we can empty ourselves of all things, we discover that we're pure love, and that then if we can live out those things, that love that exemplifies itself in the form of virtues, we will be happy. For Aristotle, we strive to achieve the virtues, and then we live out that loving life by living the virtues, and we are happy. You see the difference there? So for Aristotle, virtue is learned through experience. For me, our true nature, love, is discovered through revelation, revelations of truth that come to us throughout our life. For Aristotle, virtue is a skill. It's a way of living, learned through experience and perfected through constant practice, where the virtue almost it becomes a habit for all intensive purposes. It becomes a habit. And he says if you practice it over and over and over, it just naturally becomes part of your character. Like I said, my position is more Buddhist. That you first empty yourself before you see that love is your true nature. And in practicing this love, you exemplify the virtues. I do agree with Aristotle that we never become perfect. We never become totally and completely happy. We never become totally and completely perfect. We're always moving in that direction. And along that path, we both think the same in this regard. There will be a lot of pain and suffering. It's not easy. If it was easy to achieve happiness through either method, everybody would have it. But we know in life that most people don't have it. So in moving in this direction, we live a moral life. For me, I say that moving in this direction, we live a loving life. The God-like life that brings us to a life that is full and happy. Aristotle believed in God, and for him, the ultimate form of God was reason. The highest level of attainment for a human being is to be able to reason abstractly. So the closer you are to reason, the closer you are to God. Aristotle did not go much for opinions and emotions. He based all his studies in all disciplines, even in philosophy, where you have this abstract thinking, on evidence, trying to be as evidence-based and truth-based as possible. And he never wanted people to just accept his conclusions. If you came along with evidence that proved what he was thinking was wrong, he would discard what he was thinking or his theory. Oh boy, how difficult this is in our own personal life. How often have we moved along in life and held true something that we were taught for decades? It actually formed the very fabric of our life, this conviction, this belief, only to be disproven, but we are incapable of discarding it. We don't have the courage to discard it. We fear discarding it because it will make us uncomfortable. It will propel us in a different direction. It will force us to take a path in life that is very, very uncomfortable and could be tumultuous and difficult. So whether it's politics, religion, whatever the field, or in personal life, people telling you that you never measured up, or parents that raised you to think that you're not good enough, can you shake that? That's the challenge. Can we dare to discover truth? Do we dare to be happy? So this is, I think, the great challenge here for us, and this is what I love about Aristotle, challenging us to rely not on our emotions or our feelings all the time. I mean, they certainly play a part in that, and there are different philosophers who will attest to how that is a big part of our nature. But really, all things have to be based on what is rational. Reason. Reason is what distinguishes us from other forms of life. And it is the thing that makes us human and gives us a human purpose, different from any other living or non-living things. We are driven to reason, whereas all other things, whether it's an animal, a plant, or a rock, has a purpose, but their purpose does not involve reason. So let's try to abandon what's been told to us that is false. Let's try not to rely so much on our emotions or feelings. And let's step out of the box, out of the framework of the life we've been living. Let's step out to discover that which is true. And in the case of my writings, I explain that you don't even have to step out. It comes to you every day, revelations. So in my case, I would say, let's have the courage not to ignore those revelations that come to us every day, that reveal something that's true that we may not want to face. Let's take those in to our being and use rational thought to work through it and to come to the realization of truths, and the primary truth being that we are created to be loving beings. Very difficult. So, for Aristotle, the highest good is the ability to reason. Well, that concludes our podcast today. I hope you enjoyed that very short presentation on Aristotle. I'm sorry to anyone who feels I didn't do him enough justice, or maybe deserving of more time, I'm hoping that the purpose of this podcast is to get a brief idea of these great minds in history and how they challenge us to be great, how they challenge us to realize that within us there is greatness. And it's just a matter of us believing that, taking the steps towards actualizing those gifts and talents and greatness and living it out. So thank you for joining us today on Dr. Doctor. And as always, we wish you a great day and a great week.